Okay, Falcus, we are streaming and recording, so whenever you have everyone, we're good to get started.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Judy just texted me, actually.
Looks like TJ needs to turn his camera on too.
Okay.
Here, let's see. Yeah, good deal.
Sorry, I'm just helping Judy out.
Understood.
Okay.
Well, Kim, there we got Kim.
Yep, sorry, I'm late.
Okay, good.
No
Zoom,
problem.
Zoom.
That's okay.
We have typical technical difficulties getting started.
Yeah. So Judy's gonna work through her issue, and she said to just go ahead and get started, so we're okay. And she'll pop in when she's able. So thank
Good
you.
deal. We'll note it for the record. Okay,
Yeah.
then in that case, I'd like to call this meeting of the East Franklinton Review Board to order. Staff, will you please identify yourselves for the record?
Yes, I'm Belkis Schoenhall, Senior Planner with the City of Columbus Planning Division.
Is there anybody else who needs to be sworn in?
No.
Okay, then Belkis, do you swear or affirm that testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call the roll, please.
Yes. So Dr. Box is here, and she will log on shortly. Mr. Egner?
Present.
Mr. Fergus?
Here.
Mr. Manfred?
Present.
Mr. Overly?
Here.
Mr. Szymanski?
Present.
And Mr. Way?
Present.
Thank
Okay.
you.
We have a quorum. All right. Then let's move to the approval of minutes. So everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes from the meeting held February 24th, 2021. If so, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Seconded.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Motion to approve has been moved and seconded. Belkis, call the roll, please.
Yes. Mr. Egner?
Approve.
Mr. Fergus?
Approve.
Mr. Manfred?
Approve.
Mr. Overly?
Approve.
Mr. Szymanski?
Approve.
And Mr. Way?
Abstain.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. New applications. We have one new application today. It is EF 2103001, address 491 West Town Street. The applicant and owner is Kevin Kindy of Triad Architects, and we're reviewing an application for new construction of the Triad office. Belka, staff report, please.
Yes, so 491 West Town Street is a vacant lot within the Arts and Innovation Subdistrict. The applicant is proposing to build a 3-story office building for their architecture firm, complete with a 7-space permeable paver parking lot and a landscape area fronting West Town Street. They're seeking approval today for the use and parking on the condition that the elevations, landscape, lighting, and materials be reviewed conceptually and approved at a future board meeting. So if we look at the materials here. Okay, so this is the site along West Town. So you can see there's a little alley there, and then right next to the alley is the lot with some mature trees in the background. So they're proposing to take away some of those trees to make room for the development. They did have an arborist go out to the site to see if any of the trees would be feasible to be saved. But unfortunately, with the construction of the parking lot and the construction equipment, it would actually hurt the root system and they can't be saved. And also some of those trees are invasive species. So it's, you know, we assess that in this case, it's all right if they are removed and not saved. Could we go to the updated site plan, please? Great, and then can we zoom in on the footprint? Awesome, great. Okay, cool. So on the left-hand side there, you'll see the outline of the office building. And then on the right-hand side, with kind of that square pattern, those are the permeable paver parking lot spaces. And then so essentially, you know, folks can come in off of the alley and park on the side there. And then you'll see a little square pattern triangle fronting Town Street, and that's going to be a landscaped area with some trees, a parking or a bicycle parking lot rack. And then can you scroll down a little bit, Nolan, so we can see the southern portion? Yeah, and then in the rear there of the parking lot, you'll see 2 new trees that are going to be planted just for some screening and buffering. And then can you go to the drawing set, please? Great. And then if you could go to the floor plan. And keep going. Yeah. So these are the floor plans. So it'll be a first floor, second floor, and then like a mezzanine level. So you can keep scrolling through. Great. Okay. Perfect. And then can you, I guess, zoom out so we can see the whole page? Great. Yeah, so here are some views and some elevations. And again, you know, these elevations and materials are still conceptual at this time. And what the board is voting on today is just the site plan. So that would be, you know, the parking, the use. And then can we go to the last page? Great. And then here are the other elevations as well. Great. Thank you. And so after review, the application is generally consistent with the recommendations of the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. The plan supports office uses in this location and recommends contemporary building design with transparent street level facades and parking that is located to the rear or side of the building. Additionally, the plan and code recommend that parking lots have perimeter screening on all sides and encourages the use of pervious surfaces. Planning notes that the parking lot screening cannot be provided on the east side due to the required fire lane, and a parking reduction of 4 parking spaces is required. 7 parking spaces are provided, and the proposed East Franklinton special parking area draft would require 7 parking spaces. As the proposed use and site plan is generally consistent with the plan design guidelines, staff does support the proposed use, site plan, and parking modification, but recommends that the trash and recycling area be screened. Planning is supportive of the conceptual elevations and materials, and staff recommends approval with conditions, with the condition being that the applicant returns for board review and approval of the final elevations, materials, lighting, and landscaping. And some code development modifications that would be approved if the board approves this today would be a parking reduction of 4 spaces to allow a parking lot between the principal building and the right-of-way, to allow no parking lot screening to be provided on the east side of the parking lot, and to allow building frontage to be less than 60% of the frontage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for staff? Okay.
Okay.
And applicant, will you identify yourself, please?
Yes,
Is
this is
anybody
Kevin
speaking
Kindy
on
from
behalf
Triad
of the
Architects.
applicant? Excuse me?
Yeah, this is Kevin Kindy from Triad Architects.
Okay. Are you the only one who's going to testify today?
We have Brent Foley from my office as well, but he's here more on the owner's kind of hat, if you want to call it that. I'm sitting here on the applicant and architect hat.
Yeah, my business partner Zach's here. Maybe we should just go ahead. You're going to swear us in just in case, is what I'm getting. You're probably getting at, right?
Yes, yes. So
Yeah.
state your names for the record, please.
So I'm Brent Foley, principal with Triad Architects.
Okay.
And Zach Price, also principal of Triad Architects.
Okay. Gentlemen, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. The floor is yours.
Okay. I think the only question that I had at first on one of the conditions, I don't think it was necessarily a condition, but it was a recommendation to screen the trash area. So on our site plan, it's shown kind of generically, it wasn't called out very explicitly, but we do have like a dashed line box. It's with note 15 at the south end of the site there. Our intent is to have that be basically like a small fenced in area. It won't be, we're not planning on a dumpster because we don't generate that much trash as a business. We're planning on those being essentially like, rolling containers similar to what, residential would use, probably 2 trash, 2 recycling. So not a huge enclosure, but we are planning on screening it in that fashion. So I think our question in relation to that is just whether or not that would be deemed acceptable. And then the other point that I'd like to make is we are currently showing this, and the site plan reflects showing pervious unit pavers for the parking stalls. We're currently working through some budget review with a contractor that's currently in about a $20,000 ad, and as an overall for this project, we're currently over. So we're looking at kind of what I would call a base bid scenario of doing the entire parking lot out of asphalt with an alternate, if we can afford it, to use the porous unit pavers in the parking stall area. It's definitely our desire to do so. It's just whether or not it's kind of more of a want than a need at this point. And so if we can afford it, we definitely would like to do it, but ultimately we got to make the whole budget work. And I think those are the only 2 things I've got at the moment.
Okay. Thank you.
Site plan.
Okay.
Questions for the applicant?
I have a.
Go ahead.
Is it okay for Kim to go ahead?
Oh, yeah. Go right ahead.
Okay. Sorry. I just had a question. If the applicant had actually looked at turning the building so that it fronted onto the street with the parking totally behind it and screened?
I think that we have a little bit early on. We do have the alley to the east, which we tried to. you could see in the, well, not this site plan, but we had another site plan that we had showing a different configuration, trying to make the access off that east side. But with the site being kind of as narrow as it is, this was really the best configuration that we could make work in terms of on-site parking, as well as making our building kind of an efficient layout and efficient size, if that makes sense.
And had you considered doing an L-shaped building that had a frontage on the street and kind of as much parking as you could get within the, the leftover space of the L?
I don't think we've looked at it in an L-shaped building, honestly, because once you get into an L, you'd have to sort of it breaks the floor plan into kind of two legs then, and it would just get trickier from an efficiency standpoint for us to lay everything out. And I'm not sure that we would gain much parking behind more than what we already have. Plus, with we recently had to basically mirror our parking lot because we had a preliminary site compliance meeting with city staff, and the fire lane really kind of forced our hand to turn the parking lot this way. It's about the only way that we can get the required what they call the aerial access fire lane, because our building is over 30 feet tall.
Right.
So our options were pretty limited with that.
And do you don't know what's happening on the lot next to you? That's just a vacant lot. I couldn't tell.
To the west, it's just a gravel parking lot. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can answer some of that. This is Zach Price. We purchased this property about 6 years ago as a little bit of an impulse buy. We were just interested in Franklinton as an area of Columbus to do a project, and have looked at numerous different uses for this property, and none of them really made economic sense for us until we needed more office space for ourselves. So to answer your question about fronting the building completely on Town Street, we did look at that. However, we felt that it wasn't going to result in as much usable square footage for us on the site and wasn't going to increase our parking count. So it was less favorable than this current situation. It would have made it easier to front the entire building on Town Street had we been able to acquire the corner lot on Mead Alley and Town Street there. And over the years, we've had numerous conversations with that property owner, and it's a very complex ownership arrangement. That owner also having that properties commingled with properties to the west there on the next block. So it really just was not something that we could acquire, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's the part that I guess I have the most issue is I would love to see that be a consistent kind of edge along Town Street, but I understand you've got a site and you've got constraints. What can we zoom into to kind of the Town Street corner? I just wanted to understand what was happening there in a little bit more detail. So you're paving out to the sidewalk. Is that right? Are those?
Yes.
You've got the permeable pavers in the parking. Well, those are the permeable pavers, right? But they're just the parking spaces that you've got permeable pavers on, right?
This is showing that the area between basically that same sort of what I'll call a brick pattern that you see in between the parking lot and the sidewalk. Right now we're showing that as porous unit paving, and the intent is that part will remain as porous unit paving because that part is trying to, give some kind of street walkable presence. We're showing 2 trees there. Our plan is to implement some furniture, at like a small amount of site feeding, so that you've got, like I said, an element of a streetscape there.
Yeah. What is the diagonal line right behind? Is that the curb?
Yeah,
curb
exactly. There's an angled curb that you can see that kind of ties to one of the walls of our front of our building that separates the parking area from that streetscape area, if you want to call it that.
Right. Had you considered doing any kind of a screen wall or something to screen the parking and kind of made the plaza feel more like it was part, and the entrance to the building feel more like it's part of the street, and kind of play down the parking?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that was a similar comment that I don't know was necessarily a condition that would be great to get a little bit more feedback on, as far as what the EFRB would require for like landscape screening. I'm assuming is what we'd be probably looking at doing there. Like I said, we do have 2 trees, but I know that's not necessarily probably the opaqueness that's desired. So I think we're open to discussion on that.
Kim, if I could interject something to help you understand how we intend to use some of the parking lot as well, in an additional way. Along the east side of the building, in our conference rooms and front ground floor area, we intend to have some glass garage doors that would open up to the parking lot. So during things like, that's why we were really interested in trying to do the permeable pavers on that portion. So during things like Franklinton Friday, we could close our parking lot off and have events and be plugged into what's going on in the community that way and things like that. So I think we should consider that, and whether or not that plays into whether or not there should be too much opaqueness in that screening for the, to have that be inviting.
I just think it would be a really interesting move, like almost pick up on that entrance angle and extend that as a wall across and screen the parking, and kind of enclose, kind of gave some enclosure to that front plaza, and also at the same time screen the cars. And I don't think you're totally closing off the space. I think it could still be used, but I think that might give that architectural continuity that I'm kind of missing.
Yeah,
It seems like they're sort of doing it. You're sort of doing it. I mean, we're not really talking about the design of the building other than the footprint, but the idea that the entry is at the end of that canted, it could be nice as a screen wall or signage, but I mean, that's for development, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, Bart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I get the angled wall trying to line up with the angled entrance. I mean, my eye goes to, it just seems like there's a lot of wasted parking lot area where there's not parking that could become some type of landscaping or redoing that front angle to create it more inviting, or get some soft plantings there rather than just all hardscape. So it just, you have like this whole area at that corner that's just kind of not even movable space for the cars. It's not necessary based with the alley there.
Yeah, and Ryan, even the trees in the back that are shown there, I don't know what they're doing. That's the alley, right? I'd rather push everything back to the alley and pick up more usable space on Town Street, like you said, and really treat that as kind of like a nice little urban space, and screen the cars.
Yeah, I think we could look at moving it back. We'd have to figure out how the trash enclosure works, because that's obviously something that we don't want up near Town Street. But if there's room for it kind of in that southeast corner, that might work.
But I'm just wondering, I mean, too, that trash looks like it's kind of too wide by too deep. I wonder if it could be kind of longer, so it's just, you're pushing those rolling bins into there, which allows you to get that space you need to push down a little bit. I mean, it might only get you a few more feet, but it looks like you have plenty of space within that parking field.
And if I could as well, just to mention, I think we are certainly open to these continued conversations, and for the purposes of our approval today, I just want to clarify, if we get the approval of the parking number and the use, we'd be happy to continue to tweak those things with you guys when we come back for the building elevation as well. I don't know how that would affect your motion, et cetera, but I just want to mention that.
And this is staff, just to kind of jump in here and contribute. So the only staff fully intends and supports screening on the West Town Street frontage as well as the rear of the parking lot. So the only modification that we're proposing for the site is for there not to be screening on the eastern portion of the parking lot where the fire lane is. But we fully intend on screening being, you know, on the front and the rear of the site. And, you know, we are stating that they are going to come back at a future date for landscaping, and that's where we would expect that screening to be shown in detail.
Thanks for that clarification, Belkis. But to that point, we do appreciate the comments because that allows us to take those into consideration when we do come back.
Okay. Are there any further comments or questions for the applicant to help to, you know, on a conceptual standpoint here?
Not for the applicant. This is for Belkis. I just want to make sure because it says they are seeking approval for use and park. So are we approving a site plan?
A count.
Just a parking count
Yes.
and just use as office?
Yes, so it would be the use, and it actually would be this site plan that would be approved. But again, before I would stamp the site plan, we would need to see screening on the West Town Street frontage and the rear for me to be able to stamp that final site plan. But since it's on that condition, they can't get permits until everything is approved by the board, which is the landscaping, lighting, materials, and elevation. So no permit can be issued until those items are seen and approved from the board.
So effectively, we would be giving preliminary approval to the site plan, effectively.
Correct. Yes,
Okay.
yes, to the site plan, and so that's the use and the parking count.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Belkis?
part of the reason that we're asking for that is so that our civil engineers can proceed with stormwater, CC, and water service plans that'll get submitted to other departments in the city. Again, we can't get final approval on those without the EFRB approval, but at least if we got, you know, approval from you guys that we're in the right direction, it allows us to feel comfortable moving forward, making those other submissions that will ultimately lead to site compliance submission.
Are you planning on designing your underground detention system with the assumption you are not going to have permeable pavers? And then if you do, all the better?
Likely,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The amount of parking, the amount of permeable won't be as big a change in this instance for this size lot. So that's probably how it's going to go. Yeah.
So Belkis, back, I just had a question about the parking. So I noticed in the documents that were online that there was a graphic that showed there was going to be additional parking that was over in the parking garage that's, I think, owned by the development that's down McDowell Street.
River and Ridge.
Is that what that? So the plan is that they have spaces in another parking facility that's. Is that correct? Right, that one, yeah. Proposed supplemental parking.
To my knowledge, the applicant was just pointing out a different parking option. I am not aware of any specific spaces that are reserved for triads in that parking garage. I think they're just showing where parking is close by. But the applicant could probably clarify that.
Yeah, I can jump in, and maybe Zach can too, but that's our intended location for any additional parking we need for employees right now. There's also, and we would negotiate that with them. There's also available, obviously, the Gravity site that's a little bit farther away and across Broad Street. And there's conversations of the site on the other side of the railroad tracks that could be potential. So we're working through that to provide we kind of prefer this one for our location, but we just can't guarantee that yet because we're not in an agreement with them yet.
So Brent, you're looking to have reserved spaces specific for triad in one of those locations?
For employees, correct.
Okay. Okay.
The site and the parking spots on your site would be most likely for guests and clients coming in.
Correct.
Yeah, so where I was going with that question was, well, geez, if you had one less parking space on site and you could pick up some more, outside area, if it helped you kind of with wiggle room to make things work right, that would be something else the board could discuss, but I'm not proposing that.
Zach, I think we'd be open to that. I mean, we're also aware of the parking challenges in East Franklinton during specific time. Well, maybe not over the last year, right? But prior to COVID, it could be difficult at times. So.
Kim, that's a great point, and I think one that from your standpoint, when do approvals need to necessarily happen for parking the city's buyback program for parking spots? When does that necessarily go into effect?
The East Franklinton special parking area?
Correct.
So that passed Development Commission. So I believe it's going to go on to City Council, I believe in April, but they have to do 2 readings before it goes into effect. And quite frankly, I'm not sure if it's 2 readings over 2 months or 2 readings within 1 month. But I would say that program, it might take effect by the end of April or May. But I would need to touch base with Jackie Yeoman on the exact timing of that. She's the go-to.
And so if we were to approve a reduction of 4 spaces today or 5 spaces today, then there's no cost involved, despite the fact that their site survey has not been, or their site plan has not been officially approved, and the building itself hasn't been approved, but they'll be kind of grandfathered in over the next few months now that they've reached out to us and had our approval on parking.
That's correct. Correct.
I guess I'd prefer to see the 7 in line with the East Franklinton plan. There's plenty of room up front there and in the park, in my opinion, to get proper screening and landscaping and set precedent of already reducing from that East Franklinton plan when there's a plan in place that can meet it. I'd prefer to see it kept at 7.
But that's not an issue for today, correct? Belkis?
Yes. So that modification would need to be approved today. So we need to pick whether we're allowing a 4-space reduction or a 5-space reduction today.
Okay. All right.
To clarify, we've asked for a 4. If the board prefers us to go for a 5, and you're going to approve that, we would be okay with that as an applicant. But we've only asked for the 4, which is in line with the plan.
Okay. Very good.
Is that a two-way alley to the east?
No, I don't believe so.
Yes,
I
it's
believe
only
so.
1 car
Yeah.
wide.
Yeah, it's a 10 foot.
Well, yeah, sorry, that's what I mean. 1 car wide.
Is there any benefit to angling your parking spaces as you pull in from town and putting those at an angle with your retaining wall or with your curb wall there?
Potentially. I mean, we certainly could look at that in the final plan. This was kind of dictated to us, Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, kind of from site compliance from our preliminary review, right?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't talk specifically with them about angled parking. I know that at least with doing the straight parking, and then if you count the leftover space, I mean, you can see, I think our civil engineer dimensioned it in there, 25.21 feet fire lane. If the angled parking is longer than straight parking, I don't think we'll have enough space left over to do our fire lane. So that would be the only
Good point.
key consideration for that.
So I'm counting 7 wheel stops, but that top spot, is that a handicap spot? Is that, why is that?
Correct.
It looks like it's a lot wider than it needs to be. It looks like you got a bunch of space in there.
Kim, that was my point of why there's plenty of space to have 7.
Yeah, I'm just having trouble reading what's a space and what's not a space.
Yeah, it's a van accessible space. So there's a kind of a crosshatched area just to the north of it, and then also a crosshatched area to the south of that accessible parking space. So the one to the north is, a little bit wider than it needs to be. You can see there's a 5-foot dimension there to the corner of the curb. So that's the minimum required on that side. The leftover, whatever it may be, 6.94 feet, is additional.
Are you required to do a van space versus just a regular space?
Yes.
Okay.
The first one has to be a van, Kim, and then you can get some beyond that. Yeah.
I'm not sure we had seen that before, but maybe we have.
I would move to approve the use and the reduction of 4 parking spaces at this time. And Kim, to your point, if in the future, when they were doing their site plan, if they can come up with a better site plan that includes screening and includes the comments that other board members have made, and at that point, it is helpful to them to possibly reduce the parking by another spot, I'd be open to at least hearing or understanding that if it substantially improved the screening and the overall aesthetic.
Okay, before we go any further, TJ, staff did recommend some conditions to this approval, that the applicant returned to review and approval of final elevations, materials, lighting, and landscaping. Would you care to add that to your motion?
Yes. Yeah. I do not believe that that our approval today is for the entire project. It would just be for approval on use and parking reduction.
Understood. Got to make the record. Good, Belkis?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I have another question, if I could, about Belkis. You said that you would just approve the screening. Is that what I heard you say?
No, so I would look for the final site plan. I would look to ensure that there's screening on both the west town frontage and the rear of the site, because today we would only allow for screening not to be on the east side, as presented. So once the whole project is approved and we have the final drawings and you all have approved the elevations and materials and final landscaping, that's where I would look for all of that to be in place before I would issue a certificate of approval and stamp drawings.
So this idea of more of a solid screen wall on the town street side, that's still an open discussion, is that correct? And yes, something that fits into the architecture. Obviously, it want to be an extension of the architecture in some form.
Exactly. So. Yeah.
Okay.
So all that's going to be seen and reviewed by you all at a later date.
Right. And we are not approving this site plan as is. We are just approving the use and the parking variance.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Well, do I have a second for TJ's motion?
Second it.
Hello?
That was by Dr. Box, I believe.
Yes.
Okay, very good. So I'm on record. Is there any further discussion? If not, call the roll.
Okay, Dr. Box?
Approve.
Mr. Egner?
Approve.
Mr. Fergus?
Approve.
Mr. Manfred?
Approve.
Mr. Overly?
Approve.
Mr. Szymanski?
Approve.
And Mr. Way?
Approve. And the dogs do too.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you,
Thank
gentlemen.
you. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate all your help.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have one conceptual application today. It is EF 21-03002, address 499-501 West Chapel Street. The applicant and owner is Patrick McHugh, and we're reviewing new construction of a 3-unit owner-occupied dwelling. Belka, staff report, please.
Belkis, before you start, I want to make sure to announce my recusal.
Yeah.
I've been giving him kind of advice moving forward. He's also within a 300-foot radius of my property as well. So I will.
Okay.
What's my my recusal mode here? Do I turn off camera and turn off speaker?
Exactly. Yep. Just put yourself on mute and turn off your camera. Thank you, TJ.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so 499 to 501 West Chapel Street is a vacant lot within the Arts and Innovation Subdistrict. The applicant is proposing to build a 3-unit owner-occupied apartment dwelling with a 2-car garage fronting on West Chapel Street. They're seeking board feedback for their conceptual design. And if we can pull up their materials, or first the Google Street View, actually, if we can do that. Great. So this is the lot here. So really the lot we're talking about really shoots back from these 2 sidewalk pieces back to where those trees are. So that's what we're talking about here. Great. Thank you, Nolan. And then if we can go to the drawing. Great. So again, you have the floor plans there, which goes over the 3 dwelling units. And then again, you have the garage fronting town with like a balcony on the 3rd level there. And then you have 2 views, kind of 2 elevations with the conceptual materials. The entrances would be on the east side of the lot, and then that large blank wall would be along the alley side of the lot, the west side of the lot. So you can just leave this up, Nolan, for everyone to view. But after staff review, the application is generally consistent with the recommendation of the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. The plan does support 3-unit dwellings in this location and recommends contemporary building design with 4-sided architecture. Additionally, the plan recommends that parking be located behind buildings and that primary entrances should be oriented to the primary street with direct access to a public sidewalk and incorporate front stoops or porches. The plan also recommends incorporating landscaping, sidewalks, and street trees for new housing. So as such, staff supports the use, but recommends the following, and that's that the front facade include a front door entrance with a porch, front yard landscaping, a sidewalk that leads to a public sidewalk along the West Chapel Street frontage, that windows, a mural, or vertical elements be provided on the east elevation for some architectural relief, and that a street tree be planted along the West Chapel Street frontage. Staff recognizes that a paper alley exists to the rear of the lot and recommends that the applicant develop the paper alley from the closest alley or street to the site in order to provide rear parking as recommended by the plan. Alternatively, staff recommends that the front-facing garage be reduced in size to a double-stacked garage and be minimized in appearance through reseating the garage entrance and or painting it a darker color to create a pedestrian-friendly streetscape. Staff does note that approving a front-facing garage would set a precedent for the development of future front-facing garages in the neighborhood. A parking reduction of 4 parking spaces is required. 2 parking spaces are proposed to be provided, and the draft East Franklinton special parking area would require 3 parking spaces. So in sum, staff supports the use and generally supports the conceptual architecture and site plan. And since this is a conceptual site, a conceptual application, there is no official staff recommendation or condition. Thank you.
Thank you, Belkis. Any questions for staff?
Belkis, can you remind, there was another one that we had this same issue probably about a year ago, and we talked about trying to find out some more information about the surrounding land. And I believe we never approved or heard back from that, or I can't remember what we ended up doing on that.
Yeah. So that was Rocco, and similar situation. He was proposing just a single family dwelling with a front-facing garage. Staff strongly recommended that the garage be placed to the rear of the home, and the board ended up suggesting that if that was not feasible, given some constraints with ODOT, because it was right next to the highway, then they kind of find some design tactics to mitigate the appearance of the garage or make it look like a front porch or something like that. But he never ended up returning for a final review due to financial constraints.
And if I remember correctly, our board comments, that one did have a front porch and a front entrance, and the garage was set back from that front porch. And so we were generally willing to discuss the front entry garage, but it definitely wasn't how this is, where the garage hits you flat in the face and there's nothing there.
Correct. That previous proposal had a front porch and a door accessing the home with the garage, next to it. Versus this one only has the garage as the frontage. Yeah.
Okay.
Elkis, was there a site plan with it? I'm sorry. Was there a drawing, drawing before this? I'm not sure I saw that.
No, this is it. I think they tried to do a site plan in the lower right-hand corner there. Obviously, we'd want to see something more robust and detailed for any final drawings, but since this is conceptual, this is what they have at this time.
Is it possible to zoom into that corner?
Yeah, can you zoom in into that piece? Great.
You couldn't see that, Kim?
Not on my tiny little Apple MacBook Pro. So you said there is no alley. The alley doesn't exist. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't exist. It's not visible to the eye. It's overgrown. But you see it on a map,
Right. But it could be improved and used for rear access to a building like this, right?
But it's not vacated, right? It's a paper alley, but not vacated.
That's what I'm trying to understand. Okay.
Okay. And I will say, I did speak to public service. There's a gentleman in public service that deals with anything regarding alleys, and I spoke to him about it. And he said that in these types of scenarios, they would put development of the alley on the property owner or owners if they want to, group together and do something like that. And then the city would be the one to maintain the alley after it was developed by the property owner. So that's kind of where that falls.
So in essence, a driveway could be constructed from Mead Alley, I guess, or from the other side, and provide rear access to parking, and if the landowner wanted to pay for it, it's possible.
Yeah,
right?
I wouldn't call it a driveway. I would say that they would construct part of the alley so they could get rear access to their property or to their lot.
Right. My point is, it's no more than a driveway that you would see anywhere, like just I don't know, 12 feet wide or something, and so it's not a huge cost or expense to construct something like that. It seems like a rear access to this would make the most sense, and if the other landowners that are on each side, participated, that would be ideal. But I still struggle with the front loading parking. It just doesn't seem.
Yeah. Staff's preference is that, staff's preference will always be that parking is access to the rear of the property. We understand, that there are some site restraints with this one, but that's our absolute preference. And again, noting the precedent that this would have if parking were to be accessed from the front, and furthermore, a new curb cut would need to be developed along Chapel for that front-facing garage. So it'll always be our preference to find a solution to locate it in the back. Yeah.
Because every other property would be exactly the same way. You'd get rid of all the street parking, the sidewalk.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I agree.
So the cost
Yeah,
of,
it would be
are
setting
the,
a strong precedent.
so the reduction in parking in the surface area that you'd have to pave that parking could go into the construction of the alley, in essence.
I can't really speak to cost, but potentially. Maybe we could swear the applicant in and kind of
Yeah,
get their take. And
let's get the applicant in here and have him join the discussion, since this is a conceptual application. Applicant, will you identify yourself, please?
Yeah, hey everyone, it's Patrick McHugh.
Okay, and you'll be the only one speaking today?
I also have two of my architects on the line, Sean Thompson and Ted Manfred as well.
Okay. And gentlemen, can you turn your cameras on, please?
they'll need to unmute themselves as well.
Yes. Okay, so I have Sean Thompson and whom else?
Ted Manfred. I know his video was on prior to the call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mean TJ? They're different Manfreds.
It's his father.
Hold on, I'm going to go help him.
Can't wait till we get back in person.
Yeah, I know.
All right, what's going on here? Bill, could you let me know when everybody's on camera?
There it is. Finally
I'm
came.
sorry. I didn't quite hear you, Bill, there.
Let me know when everybody's on camera so I can swear them in.
Okay, I think we have him. I think Ted is with us now.
Okay. All right. Gentlemen, state your names for the record.
Ted Manfred. John Thompson.
Okay. Anyone else?
Patrick?
Nope, that's it, just me. And those two.
And there's Patrick. Okay. Looks good. Gentlemen, you swear or affirm that statements, that testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do. I do.
I do.
Thank you. Okay. The floor is yours, and this is a discussion format, so anybody feel free to so discuss.
Okay, great. Yeah, just I'll kick off with a little background. I came across this land back in December of 2018. That's when I closed on it, when I was moving back to Ohio. And then since then, my fiance and I have been saving up to start this build process. We actually live over in River and Rich right now. So after 2 plus years now, we're ready to move forward with the building on the lot. The initial plan, but it's all open to conversation, obviously, is kind of the warehouse feel with the neighborhood, but then kind of make it look more like we added on, some hardy or whatnot, like an addition of some sort as well. But it would be a 3-unit owner occupied, as Belkis mentioned. And then in terms of some of the items talked about, the alley was a big thing. I also reached out to the city, and they said the same thing to me, that paying for the alley, because it's a 10-foot alley, I believe, would be on my responsibility. I know you mentioned some of the other landowners around. I know we have Dewey Stokes on the line. He owns 6 of the 8 total parcels on the block. The 2 immediately to the east of me, and then the 4 along Town Street. And then Nationwide owns the parcel immediately to the west of me on Mead Alley right there. But the reason that the parking garage, the initial designs, was because of kind of the alley restriction as well. But we did kind of look around the neighborhood. I know there are even pretty close right around the corner of McDowell, a property with a garage. That all played into that initial design. As far as the parking goes, I know we have 2 spots here. I'm kind of limited with my 75 feet by 25 feet, and so one of the requests I would have would be on a potential parking reduction from 3 spots to 2 spots, pending future design, obviously. And then I think there was also a mention of that west wall and the architectural relief. The initial plan is, given that we are in the Arts and Innovation District, would be to potentially commission a local artist to paint something more colorful or tapestry-like, kind of like what we see around Brewdog or Chrome Edge, to help brighten that up, knowing that Nationwide currently owns that lot directly to the west, and perhaps that gets covered up if they move forward with any designs on that site. But next steps, kind of what I'm looking from today is, yeah, these are the conceptual plans. Happy to hear any feedback that you would have, and I think I'd like to start building. Think it'd be good to move forward maybe for next spring or summer move-in in this place, and I think top of mind for me is the parking reduction as well.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I may have missed it, but so why aren't there any windows on that? Whatever side that is, that's blank right now.
Yeah, and I'll let Ted correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's up against the property line, and I believe due to that there are restrictions.
Got it. I wasn't quite reading the site plan, but I see that.
Yeah, we're only 6 inches off the west property line. That the 25 foot is obviously a very snug space. So.
Right. I see that now. Thanks.
The overall lot is 25 feet wide. Is that correct?
That's correct, by 75 feet.
So your building is about 20. It's 20 probably.
From the interior walls, I believe. I think it's about 4 feet. Again, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong here, for the sidewalk on the side, on the east side, for the entrance.
I think it's like 19 foot, because we tried to keep 5 foot. If you zoom in that upper left-hand corner, we tried to keep 5 feet off of the east property line so that we could extend the sidewalk out to West Chapel. And then if we're 5 feet back, we don't have to worry about fire ratings of windows, and can introduce more glass on that east side. Yeah, we're 19.6 outside to outside.
So obviously the issue is all of these other properties, as they develop, while I kind of like the little warehouse chunk that fronts out on Town Street, I just am really worried that it's going to set a precedent of all of these other small lots wanting to do garage front and just basically eradicating the street frontage, parking, tree lawn, all of that would be taken away in this area. So it does seem like flipping this, keeping you could still keep the idea of the terrace in the front on Town Street, which is nice, but basically wondered if you did look at flipping the garage to the back and utilizing that paper alley.
Yeah, I'm certainly open to that, as well as any other feedback. I think we wanted to get the conceptual in front of you before I dove too deep with the architects in terms of aesthetics as well. But I think I'd be happy to entertain that and talk through that. As long as I think the parking was my biggest issue with a lot this small.
So just to, and as the rest of the board knows, I don't interject my opinions too often here. I'm the chair and an attorney, so I know precious little about architecture. However, I do know about precedent. And as the board also knows, I am quite reluctant to establish precedents that could be adverse in the future. And I think I would agree with whomever said that approving a front load garage in this circumstance is most likely setting a precedent that will cause us a lot of trouble in the future. So that I think we need to see that turned around from my perspective anyway.
Bill, I agree wholeheartedly. I would not be supportive of the front garage, just with small lots in this design, with there still being an alley back. You would set a precedent where it'd just be all driveway along Chapel for every lot going forward. So I think the concept of, go ahead.
And many other places as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I'm generally support. I think the design, I'm fine with the no windows on the one side, under, the zero lot line essentially. I think, we'd be very close if this was flipped to the alley side, in my opinion. I mean, there's little things that we would tweak on that, but unless that's done, I think it's a non-starter in my mind.
I think it also would be.
How do you all feel?
I think it also would be cleaner if you thought conceptually about this as the warehouse building in front. So it would have lots of glass and light to Chapel. And then you have this, I don't know, the flat roof. It seems like it's too much like the warehouse. Like maybe it could be more like a shed roof or something that it looks like these two buildings overlap, but I'm looking at your east elevation. It looks like you're splitting that building into three materials. I think it'd be maybe more interesting if it was just like, I got one building living inside the warehouse. They're sort of overlapped. It's simpler. I like the simplicity of it. I think it could just be a little simpler.
Great.
Matt, Judy, do you all have any feedback or comments?
So I would just be in agreement about the garage not being up front. I'm a little surprised the city doesn't pay for those alley improvements, but yeah, I don't think having a garage onto the front edge there is a good idea.
I agree with that, and I have a question.
Yes.
I'm a little concerned here. I live in a neighborhood where you've got a 10-foot setback, which clearly you can't do in a 25-foot lot. But we look like having a whole bunch of shoeboxes lined up side by side. Is that where this is going? And then a garage in front of every one of them?
We're going to put the garage in the back.
No, I understand that, and I support that. But my question is that you can't have setbacks. In fact, this one side, I think, is less than a foot setback. Does that mean the next property is basically going to have no room for even gutters? I'm lost on the construction of this.
I understand, Judy. So in terms of the zoning code in the Arts and Innovation Subdistrict, you're basically able to have a 0-foot setback. I do believe side yards need to be a minimum of 3 feet. So you do need some space on the sides, but in terms of the front, it can be 0 feet per code.
Yeah, so on the side, if you've got 0, I'll say the north side, I don't care. You've got 0 on the north side. What happens to the house that gets built next door? Do they then have 0 on the south side and the 2 walls are touching? Do they have to have their 3 feet on their south side? How does that work?
Yeah, well, on each side, there needs to be 3 feet. So one lot needs to have 3 feet, and then the next door neighbor would have to have 3 feet as well. So there would be a total of 6 feet of separation between the 2 houses.
So it's not a 0 lot line, it's a 3-foot lot line.
Not on the side, no. On the side it's 3 feet.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's what I was talking
Yeah.
about, the side, because we have houses here in West Franklinton where you can't clean out your gutters because there's not room to get between the two houses to do that.
Very
Yeah,
German
yeah,
villagey too.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I don't care for the
But
look of this at all, but I'm really with everybody else on the front garages.
Okay.
Okay, I'm done.
Thank you. Right. All right. Well, any other comments or feedback? Or I feel like we've
Belkis,
addressed the
just, I think what
yeah?
Judy's comment is this is drawn at 0 on that one side.
Oh, okay. I
Yes.
see that.
And
I
so
see that.
if you're saying it wouldn't get approved that way, then we have to give that comment because that would mean they would need to shrink their building.
Right. Let me take a look at the code really quick here. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Actually, so for the Arts and Innovation District, minimum side yard is 0 feet. So, you know, that would be something. So
That's
minimum side yard is 0. The parking setback is 5 feet, but that's for parking lots. So, yeah.
So
is
in other
0.
words, in answer to Judy's question, you could literally have 5 of these buildings, for example, all be 0 lot line. They're just pinned right up against one another.
correct.
They all have
And-
side yards. They have a big side yard and they're establishing the pattern.
Yeah.
You know, the next building to the east is going to do
Yeah.
the same thing.
Yeah,
And then Nationwide has the property to the, well, they have that little parcel, yeah, but they're going to have to do something similar.
We had this in Victorian Village and further north here on Guilford, where every house was on the lot line, and that meant the next house had the side yard, which actually is better than skinny little yards on both sides.
It is nice, yeah. I like the side yard.
And we thought that Nationwide, being that they have Mead Alley, could tuck their building up tight against Patrick's building, so then that would give them the exposure on the west. And then if the person going to the east of him mirrored, you could actually end up with a 10-foot sort of yard entry between the two buildings. But again, we're only developing the one lot.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I know we're not in Dodge Park. We are in the Arts and Innovation District, and President is certainly concerned with new development. I just do know there's plenty of existing structures nearby that do have those garages in front. Just like I said, 75 feet away over on McDowell, 129 on the corner of McDowell and Chapel has the garage right on the front as well. But I do get that. And as far as the rest of the lots, I know we have Dewey listening in as well. He owns 6 of the 8. Not sure if his plans, like if he would develop similar structures as mine along. So I'm not sure it'd be a bunch of shoebox houses in the line or in a row. So I wanted to call that out as well.
What's the building that has the garage on the front? Is it, it's not a new build, right?
No, it's 129 McDowell on the corner of Chapel and McDowell.
So it's a converted warehouse.
Like a studio, kind of it looks like with the garage in the front.
Yeah, converted warehouse, yeah.
Yeah, see, we were established, I'm going to take a wild guess here, around 2012. And so anything that was built prior to 2012 can be non-conforming to the current code. But we have to deal with the code as it is now. And were we to approve a front-loading garage under the current code, that would constitute a precedent going forward. So that's our issue.
Right. Right.
Correct.
And
And
is this more of an urban area? Or sorry, Belkis, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I did look that address up really quick, and that actually, I think Kim mentioned it, but it was originally built as a warehouse. Maybe it was like a car shop or something. And so it was originally built that way with the existing curb cut. It looks to be contributing like an older building, maybe from the 50s, 40s, something like that. So that's actually kind of comparing apples to oranges, because this is this is a new build for a residential use versus someone who has retrofitted, you know, an existing warehouse building that was built for the purpose of having a front garage.
Got it. Yeah, I know one of my goals is kind of to make my new build, at least in the beginning, more rustic looking to fit in with the older structures as well, especially given this is more, I thought, more of an urban environment as opposed to residential in this particular area or sub-district.
Right. And that's why I like the idea of it being the warehouse in the front. I just don't like all the street presence being taken away by the in and out of the cars.
Okay. Yeah, I think we'll definitely take some further looks at this. I did want to get something in front of the board today before I went too deep with the architects on the designs in itself. But I think the big ask I would have too is similar to the last gentleman on the call around the parking reduction. So I can move forward with designs accordingly, especially given what Belkis mentioned with the April meeting for the special parking.
So at this time, we can't move forward with any type of approval, just since, you know, your site plan isn't, if you approve use and parking, that's also tied to elevations and materials. So really you would need to be ready with your whole final design before, you know, any type of certificate of approval could be given. And it seems like your site plan isn't final. So we can't approve use or parking until you have a final site plan, which we don't have at this point. So we can't move forward with a vote or approval today. This is just purely conceptual. But you could come back in April for that.
Got it. Would you approve a double stack garage in the front, or are we still just leaning towards the back?
Back.
Got it. Okay.
I thought about that too, Patrick, but I still feel like you're going to have a better, I mean, an inline garage. I mean, it's hard to get the second car out, and you know, it just seems like that alley is made for the service side of the building. And you know, I would continue discussions with the city about exactly what they could provide. I mean, it is a right of way, and they do have funds for you know, improvements in right of ways that might be available. I don't know.
Yeah, Patrick, if you're asking on whether we're supportive of 2 versus 3 parking spots on that, I can only speak for myself, but I would be supportive of 2 versus 3. But
yeah, I would too. I mean, I would definitely support that parking reduction. I thought you were talking about doing an inline garage where you have 2 cars stacked deep. Gotcha.
I mean, that could be an option, but yeah, overall, if we did have to move the garage back, yeah, the parking thing was my concern in general. If it's in the front or the back, just 2 cars versus 3 was my initial question.
I would support that too.
That was unclear. Okay, thank you. I appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you.
So just Patrick, just so we're aware too, that will reduce the length of our building somewhat because we'll have to provide turning radius to back out onto the alley. But if you're okay with that, yeah, I think if there's anything that this group can do to help, you know, leverage the city to help improve the alley, that would certainly be helpful for Patrick.
Right. I guess on that note,
the neighboring property owners, you mentioned Dewey, Stokes, and Nationwide. That's a group of 3. That's a conversation to have, isn't it?
Sure. Yeah. Poor Dewey's had to deal with my phone calls quite a bit now for the last 2 years. But certainly, Nationwide's a little trickier to get a hold of.
If at first you don't succeed, try again.
Nationwide is a tough one to get a hold of. for sure.
Yeah, but Dewey's not that hard to reach, and he owns most of it, right?
He does. I've probably talked to Dewey once a month now for quite some time, and Port Florence as well.
Luck.
I guess on that note too, if it wasn't a garage in the back, Sean just did mention reducing the length of the structure itself. Would carports then also be an option, or some sort of overhang, non-enclosed space if it's off the alley?
I would be willing to support that. If it was in, I would support that if it was well integrated in the architecture.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the cantilever would solve the turning radius issue on the ground floor. Just set back the ground floor and then let the upper floors come over it.
Right. Exactly. Ted, John, do you have any comments?
Sorry, Ted was muted before. Ted, did you have any other comments?
Yeah. Couple items. There's no parking on the south side of Chapel. And as you go west from Chapel, past Mead, down past that new development, there is no tree lawn or setbacks all the way down Chapel. In fact, the next building down is the concrete block building that's down on the corner of McDowell and Chapel, and that sits right on the property line also. So requesting a tree lawn or landscaping, again, the question is, this is not a residential zone. This is a commercial zone. And sometimes I understand where you want to be, but most of that is appropriate if you're doing 150 feet and you've got multiple units and you can do things. But when you're dealing with a 25-foot wide lot where you can barely get a 19-foot wide building on it, and that 10-foot service alley in the back, the city of Columbus has sent Pat the specifications. That has to be upgraded to the city of Columbus standards. So it's not put some gravel down and let's drive on it. It needs to be improved to the city of Columbus street standards. That's expensive. And as Sean said, the building's got to be shortened by probably 15 feet in order to come down that alley and make a turn to get into a parking garage or carport or whatever's put on the back. And at 25 feet wide, the max you can get is 2 cars. It's just, unless you want to double load, and if you double load, now you're talking about shortening the building by 40 feet. And now all of a sudden it's not a 3 unit, now it's maybe a 2 unit.
I understand there are challenges to it, for sure. I mean, and to your point of, I don't know where all that feedback is. Is that me? To the point of the no parking and the lack of tree lawn, we did a project just west of this called Out of Town, and it does have, we set the building back so there's a little bit of micro landscape that addresses the sidewalk there. So, you know, I understand the challenges, and it's not a typical condition, but I think there's an opportunity to improve the public presence even on a kind of narrow secondary street like Chapel. And the warehouse is the only thing that has to be 19 feet wide. I'm talking about your warehouse kind of piece there. So you potentially could, I mean, the other thing to consider is the height of this building. If there's a desire to get more units in, could you go higher? I mean, I know that I'm unlocking a lot of variables, but But it's just a challenge of this kind of site where there is an alley that's available, where it seems natural to put things like cars and parking and utility. It's unfortunate it hasn't been developed to this point, by the city, that it's just existed as a paper alley, but it's an issue of developing the sites. Yeah.
Hey, Ted, you might be on mute if you're talking, by the way.
No, sorry. My assumption would be that alley 50 or 60 years ago or 100 years ago, when there were small houses on each one of these lots, was a usable alley that people pulled cars in and maybe pulled into garages that were on the rear of the site. But since the majority of the houses have been torn down 30 or 40 years ago, that alley has now overgrown with trees. There's virtually no pavement left because of all the decomposition of the leaves and all the dirt debris that's blown on that alley. So even though it's 10 feet wide, at one time it was probably a usable service alley. Right now it's not, and Pat would have to develop 60 feet or 56 feet of that in order to get access across his property. So don't know what the dollars are, but it's money, obviously, that Pat probably didn't have in the original budget. There was,
I just thought it rang. My budget is tight.
If the door on the front were just a single door that was 8 or 9 feet wide, with a single door and not an overpowering 16 or 18 foot wide door, with one single door off the front be acceptable? I mean, the point was we were trying to make this look like a 60-year-old warehouse that had been sitting there for a long time, with windows with very small panes and buttons to look very industrial in nature on that front 40 feet of the building. Taking those windows around the east side and upstairs and making it look like an old 2-story industrial building that had a service entrance out on the chapel. I don't know whether that sets precedent. I mean, obviously, if Dewey moves ahead and develops 6 other lots, he's not going to build a building like this. He's going to build buildings that are probably more cross-speed. We've got a linear building on Town and another building that's on Chapel and double-loaded parking through the center. So that service alley at some point will probably be requested to be vacated because it's going to be in the way when they want to develop that 6-lot parcel. So what he's doing and what he's spending to improve that alley will probably go by the by when those 6 lots are developed. Nationwide will develop their lot opening to Mead and opening to Chapel, and they, if depending on how it does, and that parcel's a little wider. That parcel's 31 feet wide, so it's an extra 6 feet.
They can do it like TJ did it, and they can have parking in the back, side slung,
Well, they can
but
pull in.
they're on a corner lot.
Correct. A landlocked parcel that's the second one over where you can't get to Mead and your only real access is Chapel. Yeah, there's a paper back there, but that paper is and it's so narrow that all you can do is drive one way down that alley, and then by the time you swing to make a turn, you're going to lose 10 or 15 feet off the back of the building just to be able to get into something.
Yeah.
How about making your building? How about making your building 15 feet wide, like Shotguns in German Village, and then you have a side yard that you could use, that you could get, a curb cut, not a 19-foot curb cut, but a curb cut that you could get one vehicle and stack 2 vehicles deep, not even have a garage. What do you think of that, Ryan?
I guess I had to say, this is unfortunate. Being a developer myself and look at, it's unfortunate, but this is kind of one of those chicken or the egg. There's a lot of vacant land there, and our job as a board is to look what's best long term for the neighborhood. And there is a lot of what happens with Nationwide, what goes around there. But if we're asked to look at this in a silo of one property, the answer to me is a garage off the back. If this is combined with more, there's other options in there. And unfortunately, that's the view that we have to, at least I have to, as a member of the board, look at for the long-term neighborhood.
Right.
It's unfortunate. I understand across the alley. I understand everything you're saying, Ted, in there, but just to approve something because it's one lot there within a big piece of vacant ground is not something that I'd be prepared to do.
Yeah, and I want to revisit one of the options that was mentioned, given that there's no parking on the south side of Chapel right now anyway. What if there was a reduction to 1 car and there was a single garage door that blended in well off the front, but then we did have a stoop next to it, so you meet that requirement that Belkis mentioned, or the preference that Belkis mentioned of kind of the front-facing stoop or some community area out front with a single car, and so we'd have the reduction of 2 spots, especially given there's no parking on the south side of Chapel there. Is that something the board would entertain?
I'll speak for myself. I'll say that I could see entertaining it for this site. I can't see. I just don't like the idea of a 2-car garage, the width of that property. Then you could also have other kinds of entry. You could have a smaller garage facing Chapel. You could have an entry for one of your units above, maybe that's fronting that. So there's more interest than just a garage hitting what is
Right.
I mean, it's a secondary street, but it is a primary avenue in East Franklinton.
Yeah. I can't commit one without seeing it. The one thing I would say that brings up is additional. Now you're 3 units with parking for only 1 unit, where with this, there's the possibility of it being parking for 2 units out of the 3. Would that work if it went from 3 units to 2 units and you have a larger unit and then the studio doesn't have parking, or the small 1-bedroom? So I mean, I think we're a very open board to concepts, but without seeing something and how it's laid out, I can't say yes or no to that for me.
There's also the safety factor of cars coming in and out of a garage on the front, and in this where there's pedestrian activity, and that's another factor that I think the board has discussed in the past, and I would continue to say that any kind of parking access in that front is a problem to me.
It's an interesting site that requires a super creative solution for sure.
We're not obviously in this zoning area, we're not limited to strictly residential. One thing we could look at would be to take the front area of the building and turn it into a gallery space or some type of commercial space, and then do the residential to the rear and above, and create something that's much more open on the ground level.
Yep.
Okay, I think we've got good feedback. We need to step back and take another run at it and see. I mean, it's possible that we could recess the rear of the building 10 or 15 feet to be able to get into a garage but keep the upper floors the same depth. That 10 or 15 pretty much takes the efficiency unit on the back of the building away. But we'll have to go back and look and see how that works.
Yeah, no, thank you, everyone. I appreciate all the feedback today.
Thanks. Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. Look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, we'll be back.
Thanks.
All right.
Bill, you're on mute.
Darn, how'd that happen? Okay. Elkis, you're going to give us an overview of the land bank owner occupant program?
Yes. So I was speaking with John Turner, who you all know at the land bank or the land redevelopment office. And so their division, or the division of land redevelopment, they are going to be listing a lot for sale. So they're in the process of that right now. And that lot is at 494 West Rich Street. It's a small lot. It's about 25 feet by 100. And it's very close or across the street from the River and Rich 2 proposed development. I think we saw a conceptual application for it last year. And so the applicants for this lot that are for sale, they're encouraged to apply under what's a new program called the Owner Occupant Program, whereby buyers who agree to build a house for themselves and directly hire a builder and commit to living in the home for a minimum of 5 years will get priority, and they'll get 50% off of the price of the lot. So the idea is to reduce the price of housing by cutting out the developer and having the buyer work directly with a builder without, any developer markup. And so this program is not exclusive to owner occupants. They would allow someone who could maybe consolidate lots into a bigger development, but they have seen a lot of interest so far from applicants, mostly, interest for like developing a single family home, but they're really expecting a lot of applications. And I just wanted to give you all a heads up about this. If you have any questions, reach out to John Turner or me, and then I can connect you to John. And whatever proposal or applicant they do pick, that will then come before the board for review and approval. So I just wanted to give you a heads up about that. I've gotten some inquiries myself, and then I've had to direct them to John. So it's just a flurry of interest right now, but I wanted to, alert you all of that. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Belkis. All right. So I'm going to read a staff approved certificate of approval into the record. It is EF 2103-003, 471 West Rich Street. David Foreman's the applicant and CMHA is the owner. And the staff approved the one-line coffee outdoor dining patio. And with that, I will state that our next hearing is Wednesday, April 28th at 3 p.m. via WebEx. And we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
I appreciate your time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Love your shirt, Bart.